Across the border, India.
This is India.
Was, but not anymore. Now this is a new country, Pakistan.
Get in, get in.
In or get off!
Bali, where's Bali? Where's my son?
Get
Hitchin's got quite a large Sikh population, and I suppose as I started to talk to Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims, I began to stumble across the story of partition, which is not something I ever learnt in school. And the more I read about it, the more upset I was at the whole story, and that this story is, in a way, perhaps being covered up in our society. It's really important for people of different religions to get on, and if there is a moment of real tension then and suffering, it was the moment of partition. And in interfaith dialogue, I don't think it ever gets discussed. And therefore I thought, let's see if we can bring in the schools to help us with this. Let's bring in the historians to help us with this, so that we start to be able to understand compassionately this history. We've particularly gone to this play because we felt Child That Divides a really compassionate play. So the idea is that children watch the play on Child That Divide, their sympathies are opened up and their compassion is opened up, and it's in many ways uncontroversial. We can see that here's an experience of suffering of people of different religions.
Well, what initially inspired me was a short story by Bishop Sahani. It was called Pali, and it's about a lost boy, a Hindu boy, who finds himself at the wrong side of the border because his home is now in the newly formed Pakistan. Their family have to leave to go to India, and his fingers slip from his father's hands and he's lost. He gets taken in by a Muslim childless couple, and he sort of gradually becomes Altaf, the Muslim boy, and then 7 years later his real father comes to get him. So it is kind of through the dilemma of what happens to Pali, I've woven in the stories of 4 other children. Children are often the victims of these larger historical events that they did not create, and I was interested in how their stories are often lost. What happened to the children that's not even in history books.
I found Child That Divide to be, well, I was speechless at the end actually, and I'm not normally speechless. It was really truly moving actually, and very profound. It actually inspired me to think about what I could do to kind of play my part in changing a narrative really that's out there. And I think
This is my house. That's my hiding hole.
How can it be your house?
Why didn't you tell me, Ash?
For me, it's very close to heart because I was born and brought up in India, and our history was all about the partition and the British Raj.
I feel like Christians and lots of other, even atheists and other people, are so unaware of the events that have happened. And I feel like this is such an important play that it really brings to light in such a human and emotional way the things that happened.
I think it's a timeless story. I think the human suffering as a result of partition, artificial boundaries on maps, refugee crises, I think it's an unfortunate stain on humanity.
And it's one of those things the British are ashamed of, I think. And I'm British, I'm ashamed of it. My granddad's from Punjab, he was a teenager. He was there when partition happened, and it's just so important. And I feel like everyone kind of needs to know about it, because everyone knows about the Holocaust. It's equal in its awfulness, and Child That Divide, it just kind of shows the importance in kind of quite an understandable way.
Really enjoyed it because I'm studying the British Empire at the minute at school, and I thought it was such a great way to get the story of partition out to people of all ages. I just thought that that was really good and clever.
You a Hindu darpok. Why you didn't barge all the way back to India like the others? Don't scare me, madhead. My dad's a Pura Agni. He can make people like you disappear. Kaput.
I'm a member of the Partition History Project. I'm one of the historians who's been helping to put together the educational material that's gone out to schools before and after they've seen the play. The Partition History Project is a project that I think was really initiated by interfaith clergy with an interest in taking partition into the classroom as a means of bringing children from different ethnic and faith backgrounds together to help them to understand that there's a common humanity running through the experience of their families.
Well, it's particularly appropriate now because it's the 70th anniversary of partition. Britain at the time clearly had a fundamental role in what was going on. We are poorly educated about this. We don't understand enough about this extraordinarily important part of our history, and it's really important that we raise our consciousness about that.
It's important to teach partition in British schools because partition is part of the history of all children in all British schools. It's not history that belongs just to the children of South Asian backgrounds. It belongs to the history of children from white British backgrounds as well. Child of the Divide is a unique piece of theatre. As I think historians of that period recognise, we know very little about what happened to children at the time of partition. There's very little written in history books about how children experienced that upheaval. So Child of the Divide actually allows us to get a sense of that first-hand personal experience. Many of the people today, in fact probably most of the people today who can remember partition would have been children at the time of partition. So when we think back to partition, we are sort of remembering it through the memories of people who were then 8 years old, 10 years old, 5 years old. And so Child of the Divide brings their memories alive in a way that perhaps they themselves aren't able or prepared to do.
I think Child of the Divide was an extremely moving play, and I really felt that everybody had a character to connect with there. I mean, we've all been children, so we could see or relate to the children in the play. I'm half English and half Asian myself, so my father was born in Karachi and came here when he was very young. There are a lot of gaps in my knowledge in terms of his family history, but this has certainly inspired me to ask him more and ask his parents more.
I can relate to a few things coming from India myself, how things have been different, and again, it's a message for everyone. And this was more about Hinduism and Islam, but this is a message for everyone. No caste system, no racism, it should be just love and peaceful harmony.
It's a story that should certainly be taught in Britain more. I think it's amazing. I don't know why. I'm studying at university at the moment, and I'm doing my dissertation on partition. But I think about all the people that left school at 14 and didn't do history further on, and they're not going to know anything about much South Asian history, and any perspective they have on it, it could be quite narrow-minded. If they have any education on it at all.
I'm hoping that it will be part of the educational curriculum in years to come, because at the moment we're quite good at teaching West Indian history. We really tell the story of the Holocaust very reverently, but we are, I think, ignoring South Asian history. And there are millions of South Asians in this country, or people of South Asian heritage, whose story is not being told.
How do you know when you love someone? You mean like a girl? Like me? Can you feel the breeze with every pore of your skin?
I think it's very important for history to be taught, and it was the largest displacement. Over 16 million people were displaced, over 1 million people lost their lives, and it's a period of history that was shaped by the British being in India. And I think as a Child of the Divide, if it can play a small part in people understanding our communities and our shared narratives, I think it will help community relations in this country. I hope it would help young people look at the shared legacy and the legacy of loss, actually, which has shaped our communities.
We have had to start again and try to belong.
People should belong to each other, not to places.
Yes, you're right. And we are a family.